Hello, this is Kent Comfort for tallgrasseconomics.org. Today we have a special treat for you. Dr. David Kingsley is going to talk with us, and he's going to share information about what a monster the American healthcare system has become and how it exploits and takes advantage of all of us in its efforts to just simply generate more and more profits for the shareholders in the industry. It has become a large industry rather than a humanitarian method of helping people manage illnesses that we all have to cope with in our lives at one time or another. So with that point, I'm going to bring on Dr. David Kingsley, and he's going to share with you information that he has been speaking on and writing about and researching for years. I think you'll find this really interesting. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you as soon as we get her done. Hello, Dave. Great to see you again. And I'm really looking forward to the program that we're going to share with our audience today.
Well, it's good seeing you too, Ken. I'm looking forward to what we have to say and share with our audience, and hopefully we can continue down the road with the theme we're on today.
Great. Well, I've already told the audience that today you're going to share some sort of an overview at this point, because this is going to be a series. We're going to drill down on this topic and make sure that we can inform our viewers as deeply as possible on why they should be very deeply concerned about what's going on in the American healthcare industrial complex, shall we call it. And so with that, I want you to go right ahead and share with us the information that you have prepared.
And I think that's a good term to use, is the medical industrial complex. I've kind of modified that to the medical industrial, or the medical financial real estate complex. These sectors of our economy have converged, but the title we have chosen for this series is "The US Healthcare System Has Become a Monster, and It's Ruining Your Health." Now that sounds like a inflammatory title, but we have data and we have information and facts to back us up, objective facts. Let's look at what the healthcare system in the United States has become. And first of all, let me say the US healthcare system now is driven by money, by profit. The more sickness they incur, the more money they make. They don't really make money in the corporations that are providing healthcare by prevention. Let me give you an example. In the 1970s, we had a cancer rate of about 400 per 100,000. That has gone up to 450 to 100,000. So we've actually seen an increase in the incidence of cancer. Now, we're keeping people alive longer these days because we can put a whole lot of our technology to work in treatment, and we are keeping people alive. But I don't know of anyone who's real happy about that, other than you could live longer, but do you really want cancer? But let me back up and talk a little bit about what the US healthcare system is. It's about 20% of the US economy. We have an economy of about $25 trillion. I know these are big numbers, and what we want to do is put these numbers in some perspective. Unless the public begins to look at this and wrap their mind around what's happening to them, they're going to continue being led down the old primrose path and be a cash cow without really helping their health at all. So 20% of the US economy is huge. Healthcare hasn't been that big of a part of the economy for a long time. I mean, until recently. If you go back to, let's say, the turn of the century, around 1999, 2000, and you look at the top 500 companies in the United States, let's take the top 50 companies in the United States. General Motors was number one. There were only two health-related companies in the top 50 in 1999, and that was Merck at about 48, and then you had J&J, Johnson & Johnson, about 50. So they were at the bottom. So we had two corporations in the top 50 corporations in the United States in 1999. Let's fast forward to 2020. Let's look at the biggest corporation in the world and in the United States today is, of course, Walmart. They have about $500 billion in revenue. Then you have Amazon with about $1/3 trillion in revenue. It drops down to Apple with about 250. So those are the top 3 corporations in the United States, in the top 50. Well, what's number 4? It is CVS Healthcare. So now we have a healthcare corporation with $250 billion of revenue. They folded in Aetna Corporation now. So Aetna was one of the large insurers, had about $65 billion in revenue before they were folded in, merged with CVS. What's number 5? It's United Health Group. So as we go down that top 50, we begin to see in the top 20. I mean, we could look at McKesson is now number 7. We have Cigna is number 13. Cigna is a big insurer. And by the way, these insurers are considered to be insurers, do far more than insure now. They're going into a whole lot of other businesses related to healthcare. In fact, some of the services that they're underwriting, they're now involved in, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So as we go down, we see Anthem, Centene Corporation. Now that's an interesting company. Most people haven't heard of Centene. They're number 24 in the top 50. They had revenues of $111 billion in 2020. They had actually moved up in 2020 from 46th place on the top 50, and now they're number 24. What do? Well, they make most of their money from Medicaid, poverty medicine. And we're going to talk about how that works, because what we've done is we've privatized and created a really complex financial system in our healthcare system by bringing in a lot of services that we really don't need, but corporations have been able to inject themselves, and we'll talk about that. So
Dave, hold that thought. Don't lose track of what you were going to say next. But this is really alarming information, Dave. Let's let this soak in for a moment. Let's connect some dots here real quickly, because these are very important statistics. I hope our viewers are keeping up, maybe taking notes, because the industry has, as you're pointing out, grown tremendously in a fairly short time. And the product that is, you can't really call it care, because in order for it to grow like this, more and more people have to have more and more health related issues and problems. And so now, where does the word care fit into that, if that's the case? So I just want to make those points real quickly here, because what you're laying out here is really, really important.
Well, companies in this business don't really make money if they're not doing something to your body, putting a hip in, or they're doing a heart stent, or, they really are not going to profit from wellness. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I want to bring in another perspective. Where is all of this money flowing into the system? Where is the capital flowing from that's feeding the revenues that these corporations now are showing?
Okay.
Well, Medicare in 2020 has almost reached $1 trillion. We'll make $1 trillion this year. That's $1 trillion of federal funding that these corporations are now receiving to provide care. We have about $600 billion, a little more, for Medicaid. So with Medicare and Medicaid alone, we're just slightly south of $2 trillion. In 2020, as I say, we had about $1 trillion expenditures in Medicare. By 2028, that will be $1.6 trillion. So we're going to almost add another 2/3 of $1 trillion to Medicare. Where is that Medicare dollar going? That other almost 2/3 of $1 trillion is going to go to Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage is privatized health Medicare. And we need to talk about that, because we're privatizing Medicare rapidly. If you're on Part C Medicare, or Medicare Advantage, you're really now in a program that is operated by an insurance underwriter like Aetna, United. There's a lot of smaller ones out there. That's going to cost us a whole lot more money because Medicare Advantage is receiving more per patient than traditional Medicare. We can get into that. So that's one aspect of where more money is coming from. If we look at the Affordable Care Act, for instance, the government is underwriting insurance carriers for the Affordable Care Act. If there are certain aspects of government funding of medical care we never think about. For instance, I don't even think we're looking at tax expenditures for medicine in this country. But if you're an employer and you provide a insurance to your employees, you will be able to write your taxes down, your income taxes for your company down. Well, last year we spent $200 billion in allowing corporations to write down their employee health insurance. That's really basically a big subsidy for insurance companies because the employer buys the insurance from the insurance company, then they write their taxes down. So the insurance company and the employer benefits. And if you're the employee, you can also write that off your taxes. So really, practically all the money that we're spending on healthcare in this country is coming from the taxpayers.
Wow. Okay, that's an important point right there. Let's put a pin on that one for sure. Yeah.
And Kent, when we look at what is the mission of a corporation like Boots Alliance or Walgreens Boots Alliance, or let's say CVS or Aetna, it's shareholder value.
Of course.
One of the things that is happening is the flow of capital, say from CMS or the Center for Medicare Services, Medicare and Medicaid Services, to and through these corporations to the shareholders is like a black box. It is becoming extremely complex and financialized with a lot of different entities set up for this capital to flow through. So following and tracing the money that you're spending as a taxpayer. By the way, if you look at Medicare, of the 900 and some billion dollars that we spend on Medicare, about 54% of that comes out of the pocket of the beneficiaries. You pay that through your payroll tax, through your premiums, deductions, and so forth. But when we begin to privatize it more and more, then the cost is going up for our government because we're reimbursing at a higher level for Medicare Advantage. And that's just the way the corporations have learned how to bill back to Medicare. And we can get into that because they can upcode and they have all sorts of little tricks that they can game the system with.
Sure. Now, on the matter of privatizing, let's also put on the record here, so to speak, that for decades now, we have been sold on the idea that privatizing something that used to be a government product or program or service results in greater efficiency, lower cost, and a higher quality of outcome. Has that happened?
Well, just the opposite's happening. And that's kind of why I think we like this title we have, is it's become a monster and it's ruining your health. If all of the money that we've been pouring in to medicine in this country or into healthcare, so to speak, which is double what we're seeing in countries like Japan, all over Europe, any other industrialized country in the world spends about half per capita of what we spend. But what's happening in the United States, our health is getting worse. We're allowing our public health system to deteriorate. Let me give you an example. Ann Case and Angus Deaton are two Nobel Prize winning economists. their research indicates that individuals between the ages of 44 and 45, white individuals between the ages of 44 and 45, that demographic in the United States has actually lost about 5 years of their life expectancy, or an increase in their mortality rate. That's never happened before in the history of the United States, where we've seen a demographic group begin to reverse the progress we're making towards increasing their life expectancy. So another thing that's happened in the United States is we should expect to live on average as a human being to about age 85. That's what our genetics are programmed for us to live on average. We have hit sort of a plateau at age 79. We have now put so little into preventive health. I'll give you an example. The biggest expenditure for Medicare is in heart disease. If you look at heart disease, we look at the diet and the lifestyle of Americans, and you hear very little about how that could change. But because of I guess we can look at the interface of the agricultural system and the healthcare system, but heart disease is eating up about 60% of the big expenditures that we have. Now, I talked to a famous health doctor or cardiologist at Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Esseltine, and I explained to him that I had seen this in my own research, the data that those big expenditures in Medicare between age 65 and 69 were heart disease. He said, well, that's just a natural history of a disease. We know that heart or atherosclerosis starts in children. We know young adults have atherosclerosis. There's very little amount of our resources in healthcare going into prevention of that. The same with cancer. We put all of our research, all of our public expenditures into treatment.
Right.
We have about 80,000 chemicals now that are deregulated in our environment. So we could go on and on about that. But because of the industry has such a powerful lobby, they're able to keep the legislature focused on expenditures for treatment, for fixing sick people, not keeping people healthy.
Right.
The pharmaceutical industry spent about $320 million last year in lobbying expenses. So when you look at the healthcare lobby, and that's physician organizations, it's the medical device manufacturers, it's the nursing home industry, it's the pharmaceutical companies. We're looking at least $500 billion in campaign contributions, PAC monies, and hiring people to go around Capitol Hill and in your state legislatures.
Oh, yeah, that's another big number, another huge number that is part of the medical industrial complex that does not actually improve or add to treatment or care or any aspect of helping people survive and recover from illnesses. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I think the way we can describe what's happening is the governments will, and I'm talking state government as well as federal government, because state governments have to match Medicaid dollars. They will fund so much medical care. Corporations have learned how to add value to that. How do they add value to it? One is through real estate or through capital gains tax manipulation. How to avoid capital gains tax, how to use the stock compensation, employee stock benefits to reduce their corporate taxes. We can go on and on about that, but they have learned all sorts of tricks to add value. It still costs the US government, but that's not showing up over here in the actual money that we're putting into treatment.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, go a little bit deeper on that. I think that's a pretty important element too, because again, it's a smoke and mirrors thing. It's a diversion away from what we claim we are doing in regard to providing medical care.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's about $200 billion a year that we're spending just providing a subsidy for employee health insurance.
Mhm. Sure.
So you have to add that 200 billion, which I don't think really is showing up in what we consider to be the total healthcare costs in the United States in 1 year, because people don't tend to think of those subsidies as expenditures. And then in many healthcare situations, you have a building involved, particularly in the nursing homes. We have about 15,500 nursing homes in the United States. Those are all expensive pieces of real estate. Those pieces of real estate are beginning to appreciate at a very rapid rate. Nursing home real estate, senior care nursing home, or senior, what I want to call it, senior properties, whether it's a continuing care, we're looking now at more and more assisted living. That is skyrocketing in value, just like farmland right now is skyrocketing in value.
So
a lot of investors are coming into this just to get the real estate.
Right. I was going to say, let's point out a fork in the road here on that point that you just made. That extra value could go two different directions. One direction it could go is to add to the quality of care and reduce the cost of quality of care, because this value that has nothing to do with healthcare is a source of funding. The other direction it can go is to the pockets of the shareholders without enhancing the quality of care in any way at all. I guess we know which direction it's going, don't we?
Yes, a lot of investors look at, say, the nursing home industry, or let's say the medical office building, or the hospital, not so much, because there aren't nearly as many pieces of property in hospitals, and they're not flipping those, but they're flipping nursing homes constantly because they're debt financed. So with debt financing and the use of depreciation and interest write-offs on loans, then they're able to make money by borrowing money.
Right. This might be for a future episode that you already have in mind, Dave, but we kind of have a triad here that we need to put on the table. And that triad consists of the insurance industry itself and how it is organized and earns money. And then we have the pharmaceutical industry, which is another separate entity that feeds into this. And then we have the physical hospital plants and hospital corporations around the country. Now that triad is working together very well to find ways to escalate costs, because all of it is privatized, every bit of it, and shareholder value has to grow. I mean, they're not doing anything wrong in that regard or breaking any laws. Shareholder value has to grow in a capitalist economy. So it has, but the problem is it's doing this at the expense of general well-being of the population. And that's the issue, isn't it?
I think our general well-being can't, because if you go to a doctor and you don't have any ostensible physical ailment, they don't have time for you. They have to move, right? They make money by putting you in a hospital or referring you to a specialist,
right,
or prescribing a drug.
Right.
So that is the name of the game. They advertise, tell your doctor you want this drug. You have lung cancer, Keytruda will keep you alive a few months. So that's an extremely expensive proposition, okay? Same with other forms of drugs that you see on TV. So they're not really going to make money referring you to a nutritionist. In other words, they don't get reimbursed for telling you how to keep your heart healthy.
Right.
Or talking to you about an elderly person and really getting to know you and learning about your ailments, your personal life, and all of those things that could improve your health that are maybe psychological. So you don't have that aspect because we've monetized you, and you are a unit of treatment that has to come through there at a fairly rapid clip, or the doctor finds himself out of a job.
Right. And we are all very well trained to seek out a doctor for any advice or guidance on any of these things. That may not necessarily be the only source that's viable, but that's where we go. And so they're trained in a turn to do exactly what you said, refer you to a specialist, prescribe a drug, or admit you in the hospital. And if none of those three things are necessary, as you say, you're a 10-minute visit, and that's about it.
Yes, because the pressure is on. This is industrial medicine. This is not healthcare. And
Right.
I think that's something we have to keep in mind.
Right.
Number two, we have to keep in mind that the public has been conditioned to believe that this is the best there is in the best of all worlds. Maybe they will grouse about profit and corporation, but we really have to change the public's perspective on this.
Right.
It should not be happening.
In a sense, Dave, we're talking about the chronic population, right? The members of the population who have chronic health issues. And that's a gold mine. That's a gold mine because you don't ever get past it. You're constantly on medication. You're constantly on treatment. Are we seeing presumably a growth in the number of chronic people with chronic issues, which again feeds the monster, feeds the machine, and that's, if you don't happen to be one of those people, you're not sensitized to anything that we're talking about here, are you?
You're absolutely correct. One of the chronic diseases that has just blossomed in this society, exploded, is diabetes. And if you look at Medicare, about a third of Medicare is for end-stage renal disease, people on dialysis. This is so preventive. It's like heart disease. We really should not be seeing the level of heart disease. When we look at some of the reasons that Case and Deaton gave for the drop in life expectancy, increase in mortality, about that 45 to 55-year-old white population, is opioids, suicide, alcoholism.
Right.
Because we have now a society that is not moving and advancing and treating those lifestyle problems. The opioid crisis was a pharmaceutical industry, and not just the Purdue, which was awful, no doubt. But then you have companies like McKesson that were not regulating the prescription of those opioids. So they were handing out opioids like they were candy. And then people are going through hell because their wages have stagnated. They have a little opportunity. They're at the bottom of the economic ladder, and then they get hooked on opioids.
Sure. Okay. Well, Dave, at this point here, you've provided a very good platform and outline of what we need to unpack here going forward on this topic. So I'm looking forward to the next session here where we start chipping away at each of these individual issues and providing more detailed information that people can actually think about and research themselves and then make choices and act on, rather than just blindly hoping that if I get sick, everything will work out.
Well, I think the thing that scares me the most is people aren't scared. People are not running around with their hair on fire. They're accepting what is what we have to take. And it's going to get much worse. I'll promise you, because we've got corporations lining up to get those Medicare dollars again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. And this is very helpful. I'm looking forward to the feedback we get from our viewers on this, and looking forward to the next session. And
thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
You bet.